Hello, Dr. Dana Tassone here with individuals involved in HFT6296 capstone graduate course. What we're discussing today is Chapter 4 of the lecture notes. We started our discussion in Chapter 2 with situational analysis, which is obviously your first installment of the strategic audit. By the way, when you do your first installment, you would do each step up to the board of directors and top managers. So when you get to that part, you're done with your job for that. Then when you do installment 2, you begin with the board of directors and top managers. Also, you're not allowed to cut and paste when you do your strategic audit from the information you gather from digital forms. The only exception to that would be, and you don't want to list either, you don't want to provide bullet lists. And the only exception to that would be when you get to the board of directors and top managers. We're going to talk about the board of directors here a little bit. That you can cut and paste because it would be very boring to reconstruct. So the author notes, you're all familiar with SWOT: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And the author notes that a form of SWOT called TOWS, threats, opportunities, weaknesses, and strengths, is rearranged to accommodate a summary grid. And the summary grid is called the SFAS, Strategic Factors Analysis Summary, which is a grid used to evaluate the SWOT. You don't need to know this for the purposes of this course. I've never used it in my real life, and it's only something I think that highly paid firms for large-scale organizations that are out of touch with their constituencies would use. However, the concept behind it is appropriate because what it does is it evaluates the 4 stakeholder groups. Remember I told you about those. That would be the customers, the employees, the community, and the shareholders, which are stockholders in a public firm. So from a priority standpoint, this is a good concept, but it's only conceptual. It's not something you have to practice in real life. And the whole trick, of course, is to identify and balance the responsibility to each of these groups. And then we move into talking about competitive advantage. And that's probably where the majority of strategic planning works, especially from the upper echelons, is done. You know, one concept, and there are so many more, but one concept is to find a small, untouched niche, market niche. When you hear the word competition, it's usually intertwined with marketing. And so, and the author of the text that these notes are based on talks about a propitious niche, which is a new small niche that nobody has thought of. And if you had to think of an example, you would think of the technologies, because in the world of technology, new software development happens all the time, and individuals will foresee a need, and they'll develop a product to suit that need. The problem with such a niche, of course, is that it doesn't remain propitious for very long, because once it's demonstrated to be successful, everybody else will jump on that bandwagon, and now you have the threat of new entrants, which you heard me talk about before. We go into discussion of the mission, and as I told you, when you do a strategic audit, you begin with the mission of the firm, and then you move into the external scan and then the internal audit. However, when you develop a strategic plan, you begin with an external scan, and you then continue with a strategic audit, and then you move to a comparison of those findings with your mission. So this concept of TOWS, threats, opportunities, weaknesses, and strengths, is an appropriate concept from a conceptual basis, because that's really how you do the plan. But for us, we're simply doing a SWOT analysis, a strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, and threats analysis. I talked to you a bit about the mission, which, as you know, is the purpose of the firm. It's the driver of the firm. One of the questions you want to ask when you do your strategic audit is, are you dealing with a corporation that is mission driven. You know, in a lot of organizations, and I state this in my notes, in a lot of organizations, you have two missions. You have the stated mission, which is in the mission statement, and then you have the operating mission, which is the way the firm really does business. And often you'll find major differences between the two. The stated mission is what the firm wants everybody to believe they're about, and the operating mission is the way they really do business. So, is a firm whose operating mission deviates from their stated mission really a mission-driven firm? No. If they took their operation mission and put it into words, then you know what they actually practice, then they would be a mission-driven firm. And also, when you eventually get to the end, when you do your recommended revisions or your evaluation and recommended revisions, what you want to do is you want to consider some of the rules for each of the factors, rules for the environmental scan and the internal audit. And the rules for mission is that it should be very simple. It should be very clearly stated. It should identify each of the 4 stakeholder groups, and it should be small enough to fit on the back of your business card. So if those factors aren't met, because in a lot of organizations it's not an uncommon practice to hire an author of your mission statement. That author will develop this glowing, flowery, 3-page type statement and get paid a lot of money and leave it with that organization. And then come to find out, and you know this is true, come to find out if you walk around an organization and ask people, what's the mission of this company? Nobody really knows. The mission should be something that people can memorize and embody. In other words, the culture should be such that they take the mission into their personal repertoire of skills, knowledge, and abilities. When we talk about corporate governance, and governance became a hot word, I want to say late 90s, I guess. It used to be just corporate management. Corporate governance used to be just an education term, but now it's a business term of organizations. We're talking about boards of directors. BODs, boards of directors, which can consist of individuals outside the firm or a blend of outsiders and insiders. So a board of directors oversees the firm, and they play different roles depending on the type of corporation that it is. They could merely oversee the big picture in terms of the strategic direction of the organization. And the thing to remember is that the board of directors really looks out for the shareholder interests, not so much the other 3 stakeholder groups. And so what they're doing is they're overseeing the decisions that are made in an organization, and the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer, as you know, reports to that board of directors. When you become famous in your careers and you're known nationally and internationally, you probably will be invited to serve on a board of directors for a firm. And it won't be the firm that you work for. And it'll pay you about $30,000, maybe $40,000 a year. And in most cases, you'll only have to show up for 2 meetings. So if you serve on about 8 boards, you're making a nice little side income. So I go into a detailed description of that. You can just read through that, and you'll see that that there are activities involving both groups. And then I went into a discussion of social responsibility, which is the duty an organization has or a corporation has to the members of society. And that duty can range from at its lowest level to not do harm, and to its highest level to actually do good. If the organization subscribes to a philosophy of social responsibility that says it does good, then it engages a portion of the time in philanthropy. Everybody knows about the Disney organization that encourages its people to engage in philanthropic types of activities. And then we move into a discussion of business ethics. And business ethics is, it's not pertinent to your strategic audits per se, but it's good information just to have to keep in your back pocket for the purpose of evaluating business decisions. The ethics category, business ethics came about, I may have told you this, came about when the Harvard MBAs were deemed to be analytical sharks, and schools, forced MBAs to take a required course in ethics. And there's, in the field of ethics, there are tests for decision making. And so in an organization, there may be ethics boards within the organization, internal people, and those people will establish the code of ethics, so it's established by their peers, and then it evaluates decision making. From a strategic standpoint, it's not uncommon for forthright, clear thinking, forward thinking types of organizations to include a moral audit and an ethical audit within its strategic planning process. And I went into a discussion about that just so that it's something you know about. Might make for good conversation in a social setting. I don't know, but it's certainly, as you rise up in management, as you know, as you rise the management ranks, your decisions impact more and more people, and a bad decision will hurt more and more people, and that's the reason that we preach and hopefully practice ethical decision making. And the problem is, before I got into ethics and I got into competition, I got into boards of directors and all those things, the thing that causes all of those is the shareholders, stockholders in public companies, shareholders in private, because the shareholders are individuals who invest in an organization purely for financial gain. And so the shareholder interests are based on the short-term profitability, and sustainable organizations are the opposite. So the key that we're discussing in this particular chapter is the balance between the two. Can't let the board get out of control, and the top managers have to remember and convince the powers that be of their sustainable types of decision making and strategic direction. I think we're out of time, so I'll see you in the next clip.